Hello and welcome. This is Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap, and I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan. I created the show now in our sixth season to share resources that help women navigate career and life challenges and to know they're not alone. So each week, I invite an inspiring guest to join me to co-create a show to encourage women to be more confident, resilient, and brave in their careers and in their lives. So if you're inspired by something you hear today and you want more of the same, please subscribe, comment, share, and be sure to check out the show notes below to connect with my guest and me. So I am thrilled today because we're going to dive deep into a subject that I've spent many, many years studying and sharing with other women. And today I get to introduce to you my guest, Linda Rossetti, whose impactful books about transition have revolutionized my perspective and transformed my clients' experiences. So through her insightful research for her books, Dancing with Disruption, I love the name of that book, and Women and Transition, nothing more needs to be said about that. Linda enables us to see our own transitions through a fresh and invigorating lens. Linda is a business leader. She's a Harvard MBA and a pioneering researcher dedicated to exploring the intricate dynamics of transition. Her passion lies in fostering new conversations like this one that delve into how we respond to and navigate change in our careers and lives. With her expertise, Linda creates a space where transformation becomes an empowering and enlightening journey. I know a lot of women, myself included, who just love that idea. All this change that we go through, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could be empowered by it instead of taken down by it? After undergoing a life-altering disruption over a decade ago, Linda channeled her wisdom and knowledge toward enhancing our comprehension of personal and organizational transformation. Now, we have a lot to cover today, so I want to get started and bring Linda on to join us. This time is going to fly by. Hello, Linda. Welcome. Oh, Linda, you are on mute. Please, I can't hear you now. Let's try to fix that. Otherwise, this will be a quiet conversation. Yep, I can't hear you. And we will be right back. Oh, and she's dropped off. She will come back in just a second. I just want to tell you while we're waiting for Linda to come back, this is a live show and this is what happens when we go live, right? The conversation we're about to have, I think, is going to be chock full of nuggets and insights for you, because Linda has done some very deep research for both of her books. And her latest one, Dancing with Disruption, is, let's bring her back, is just an amazing book. Hello, Linda. Are you
Hello.
back?
I hope I am. Maria, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Well, that is the biggest mystery I've ever had, but I'm so happy I'm back. Let's just ignore it. I'm so sorry for your listeners.
Yeah, no. It's a live show, so I
There
had to
you go.
figure out how to fill the time. So this is a good experience for me too. All right, so Linda, I want to, just going to move you over here. There we go. And let everybody know who you are here. I want to just start by asking you, why did you write Dancing with Disruption?
Oh, what a question. And Maria, I have to thank you again for having me join you on your discussion here. It is at the heart, as you said in your introduction, at the heart of what I do. And I think that why I wrote the book is also a heart issue. I had, as you mentioned, a very troubling time about a decade ago where my connection to a career I had pursued for almost a quarter of a century, it became disrupted in some way. And I didn't have any words to describe it. And it was an incredibly isolating and scary time. And ultimately, um, I turned to other people to help me try to figure out what was happening. And I was kind of stunned by what I found when I turned to them, because people looked askance at me saying, you'll get over this. Like, don't worry, you'll get over this. And and I was like, no, 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 there's something happening. And I was struck by how I was convinced that there was something wrong with me.
Hmm.
And really, I think that the level of upheaval that was happening for me, I described the time to other people as if the ground had fallen out from underneath me. And
Wow.
that magnitude, as well as the response I got from other people, just really, really kind of was like oil and water. And that was probably the day or the time when this book was started, right? Where I resolved to figure out what was going on, because I couldn't believe I was the only one on the planet to have had this experience. And now, a decade later, after talking to hundreds of people who have gone through similar moments, I understand the problem that I faced at that time so differently. And
Yeah.
it motivates me to have these conversations again and again and again, because ultimately, when we get to points, and 1,000 reasons can get us to the moments that I experienced, right? Our circumstances are all different. It doesn't matter. We can all get to those places. In fact, it's very normal and common to get to those places in life. And I write the book because I want to redirect how we respond, because we needn't respond with thinking that we've got some deficit or something wrong with us, or that we've
Right.
failed in some way. In fact, those moments are signals for growth. And that can mean an enlivening and open experience that really can alter the trajectory of someone's life. And that's why I wrote the book, because it's time to educate ourselves on this, because, by the way, we operate in an environment where upheaval is all around us, and the rate of upheaval is only going to accelerate. So we really need to tool ourselves with the vocabulary and understanding of, number one, what's happening, but also what we need to do about it. How do we respond differently? So, long-winded answer to that's why I wrote the book, because I'm so fascinated by the fact that we are all encountering this, and yet we have underdeveloped skills. And that
Yeah.
combination is not fair to anyone. And there you have it. There's where Dancing with Disruption comes from.
Thank you for sharing that. So many really important points that you just raised. I talk with women all the time who are dancing with disruption, but they don't know what to call it. They don't have the vocabulary for it. They don't know how to talk about it. They're being made to think that there is something wrong with them, just like you felt. I felt it too. Uh, and and then we are left to our own devices without a roadmap. And I love the fact that you have written this book, and it is a fabulous book. I'm going to hold it up again. I held it up while you were out. But I love this book. I definitely love the name of it. Um, there's great guidance in this book, and that is what we need. So tell us a little bit more about what this book is about.
Sure. And Marie, I want to stop and thank you for the work that you do before I kind of go into that, right? This notion that you walk next to people who find themselves in moments like both you and I found ourselves in, is so important. So thank you for doing that and creating the opportunity for this conversation. But those who choose the book will find, first of all, stories, right? I've worked in the last decade with thousands of people, not just in my research, but in all the seminars and presentings that I do. And I found that the real way to engage adults is through stories. And so the book is using stories of real people, right? I don't use celebrities. I use people like you and I who are navigating uncertainty in life. And through their stories, I'm bringing people through two different tracks. The first is really bringing up people's understanding of what's happening in a period of disruption, exactly what the science says about it, what human development researchers say about it, and what the people in my research told me about. So the whole first half of the book is really trying to educate people on what's happening when we get to these moments where we say, wait a minute, I don't believe this anymore, or how did I get here? The second half of the book is really about a roadmap, and it's really dropping the breadcrumbs for somebody who is on their own, feeling alone, and needing to begin to make progress. And it is sharing 4 critical areas that came out time and again, right? In my research, I sat down with nearly 300 people and talked to them about what was happening at these moments of uncertainty. And then I took 80 of those individuals and worked with them over a year, testing methods on how to help people move forward. And that's what you find at the back of the book. There are 4 critical steps or techniques that are offered. And the last thing I'll say is the structure of the book, on top of being stories, is nearly a workbook, because in every chapter there is an interactive exercise that allows somebody to use some reflections and questions to place their own experience in the learnings from the chapter, right? So the book is really tailored to be a companion, for somebody who doesn't have the benefit perhaps of someone like yourself, Maria, or somebody who is getting ready to work with someone like yourself, who wants to help bring some clarity to where they are. So the exercises in the book really can help people begin to ask some really important questions and to build some momentum in moving forward.
I love that. And the questions are profound. They really are thought starters. They're wonderful journaling prompts that just get people thinking about things, that what they're going through in a different way. And I think when we change our perspective from, it's happening to me, and that kind of victim mentality, to maybe it's not happening to me. Maybe this is happening for me. Maybe this is something that I need to go through in order to get to the next best place I could get to. I love the questions that you pose. I'm a big proponent of asking people questions about what they're going through. So we've been through a lot of disruption, worldwide disruption with the pandemic. And of course, in the aftermath of that as well. But what is different about your lens into disruption?
Sure. And I thank you for starting right there, Maria, because so many of us have kind of the pandemic and its incredible imprint on our lives, right kind of front and center when we're thinking about things.
Right.
And by the way, if we took 5 minutes and asked all of your listeners, we can come up with a gigantic list of disruptions, right? It can be
Sure.
everything from the, traffic jam on the way to work to, some unexpected family upheaval that's happened, and a zillion others. And so when I sat down and listened to folks who were navigating what I thought were major life transitions, what I found is there were 2 characteristics that seemed to be common when these kind of transitions were an inflection point in people's lives. And those 2 characteristics were the following. The first is when those disruptions affect our ability to function, right? I tell a funny story in the book that, I was kind of operating in my day to day, but I actually wasn't functioning at my typical level, right? I tell people I borrowed a car, and I inadvertently took the wrong car out of the parking lot at my employer. Long
I love
story,
that story.
right? It is a funny story, but but it's also horrifying, as the person who did it. Honest to God, I was in a car for almost 2 whole minutes and didn't realize I was sitting in a beige interior car when my car is smoky gray. And it took me that long to figure out, right? So there's a level of functioning that we're aware of that isn't quite are typical. That's one characteristic. And the other characteristic is really when we are aware that there's some shifts in our self-concept, and self-concept is kind of a funny word, but I use it a lot in the book. It's really about how we think about ourselves. A lot of people use the word identity for that. I find identity is kind of a heavy word. But our self-concept is really a composite that can be made up of many things, our occupation, our relationship status, our religious affiliation, there's all sorts of things that are in that kind of composite. And so that second characteristic has to do with an awareness that there's some shifts or breaks in our connection to those elements of who we are. So the disruptions that I talk about in the book are really those that involve shifts in the way we think about ourselves. And those characteristics, that awareness and the functioning, are the two most common that came out of my research. And so while we can all talk about disruption all day long, the way I describe disruption allows somebody who perhaps survived a significant illness, or somebody who's lost a job, or somebody who's gone through a divorce or become remarried. My definition allows all of us with those differing initial circumstances to come together and talk about disruption together.
I love that, kind of setting the definition of it so we're all on the same page. And I so resonate with both of those ways to experience disruption. Those that I remember so well when I was out of the clear blue, laid off from my
Right.
20-year corporate career, and the panic that set in. Well, I'm not a panic kind of person typically. So I was behaving in ways that were foreign to me.
Right.
And they really messed with my head. They just made me think things that, would, my confidence, so many things were messed with when that happened to me. And then I think we evolve into that. Hopefully we evolve into that sense that, okay, so now there's something I have to do differently now. And that's where I think the shifts start to come in.
Absolutely. And Maria, I must have like a technology curse on me today, because I just got a message on my machine that I'm at risk of having this. By the way, listeners, Maria and I had to jump through all sorts of hoops because my traditional technology was not working. So I'm on a telephone, and it just told me that's going to lose its power. So I am going to put myself off video for a minute as I walk and get a power cord.
And go power up, please.
But let me keep let's keep talking about this feelings that you had.
Yeah, so the panicked feeling was, as I said, so foreign to me, and then there was this, what do I do next, and not knowing what I should do first, second, third. It was disempowering to me, and that was it was a time in my life that was eventually life-changing. I made some very big decisions after I got over the panic, the lack of confidence, the wondering what's wrong with me, what could I have done differently to prevent it, all of that stuff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And it's fascinating because, I think regardless of the initiating circumstance, we all can appreciate exactly what you described. And I think that was one of the most striking things in the research that I did, was how common these feelings are. And that is part of the reason why I wrote this book, is that it is impossible for us to allow people to have these feelings and not address this, because emotions play a very important role in our experience of disruption. And I think it's worth it, Maria, if now's a good time to talk a little bit about how we can think about that differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that there are lots of inspiring stories in your book. I wanted to ask you, which one maybe brings home that idea of responding differently to disruption. I'm so glad you're back on the video.
And I hope you can hear me, because now I'm going to talk
Yep.
even more loudly. Um, you know, gosh, there's so many, and I love all
Yeah.
of them. But there's this one story, and it's a gentleman who loses his sight from a degenerative condition. And so in his early 30s, he started to lose his sight. And by the time he finished that decade, he was sight impaired in a significant way. And he sat down and talked to me. And the first thing he said, Maria, was, "I see so much more now."
Oh.
And those words are striking. There aren't many stories of men throughout the book. The book features mostly women, but I use his story as an illustration of how responding differently can have us completely recenter our thinking about who we are. And our response, like there's wonderful research that was done at Columbia University in the 70s, which is part of the research that I used in getting ready to write the book. And the research said there's really two levels that we need to work on when we go through a significant life change. The first level is very practical, right? Which is, look, I lost my income. I need to replace that income, right? There is a very practical sense of that. And we talk about how to do that in the book. But then there's another element, which is an intense emotional reaction that we have to the change. And that part, I think, is what I hear when I listen to your kind of leading question, because we are so conditioned to respond to those emotions, when in fact, what we are going to do in the book is teach people how to externalize those emotions, to learn that the emotion is the emotion. We are not the emotion. So that while we may feel alone or anxious or sad or regretful or full of self-doubt, those are impermanent states. They are not traits. And
Mm.
so the different responses that we work on in the book really have us respond differently to the very practical things, like, okay, well, I used to be a chief cook and bottle washer. Now what am I going to be? Right? That, to the extent that, you have an occupational shift that's going on. But it also deals with, how do we learn how to have a new relationship with our emotions? Because both of those tracks need to happen to do this successfully.
I love what you just said, that the emotions we feel are temporary and we are not the emotion, right? So understanding, I always say that emotions need motion in order for them to come up and out,
Mhm.
so that we can release their temporary hold on us. So I love that you brought that to light. I think there are a lot of women I talk to are mired in
Yes.
the emotional drama of the situation, whatever it may be.
Well, yes, and look, and let's. I want to make sure your listeners hear that we're not faulting them for that, right? We are,
No,
we are conditioned in our society to make the emotions the thing, right?
right.
I can tell you in my case, self doubt and sadness were very present as I began my shift. And and some days they were so active, it was as if I was hanging on the end of a rope, and they would like
Yeah.
swing me around willy-nilly.
Yeah.
And really, the techniques that we need to learn are those that don't deny the emotion. Yes, okay, sadness is with me, but it's as if we need to drop that rope on the ground next to us. And we can see it, it's here, but it isn't having power over us. And I think that's the shift that I know you talk about in your work. And it's
Yeah.
certainly the shift that I am advocating, that we
Yeah.
tool people with the techniques so that they can be with their emotions, right? Because the emotion is a powerful source of information for us if we can get it kind of in the right place.
Right.
But
Right.
it's also recognizing that to get at that wonderful richness that emotions can provide for us doesn't mean they have to be power over us, right? We need to walk with them. They cannot be that rope that's swinging me around willy-nilly. we have
Right.
to we have to diffuse them of that power and use them in another way. And it can happen time and again. And in the book,
Right.
I talk about this technique called HAIL, HAIL, which is a 4-letter mnemonic, right? Meaning each of the letters stands for a step on how you reframe an emotion. And so, you know, when we go into this notion of responding differently, it's not single threaded, right? There's not one thing I can tell you to do, but that is a critically important thing to do, which is begin to spend time to reframe emotions and to keep your eye out, right? There are a lot of people or techniques in this world that kind of encourage us to bypass emotion, right? To say,
Mm-mm.
oh, today I feel sad. Nope, you need to feel happy or kind or whatever it is, right? And I'm very careful to recognize that, right, bypassing, right, you know, if we were teaching children, right, we would teach them how to stop track, right? We'd say, oh, if you feel, you know, anxious, we're going to have you stop doing that, or we're going to have you do something else. And that's, we teach young children
Right.
that, right, because their ability to process more complex thoughts about emotions isn't yet developed. But for adults, we kind of give a yellow flag to bypassing, because then if we get conditioned on doing that, then over time we don't trust our own feelings. And again, I go
Right.
back to the fact that they're such critical sources of information for us. We want to develop a capability to not only recognize that they're with us, but really recenter our relationship with these emotions, because they're incredibly powerful. Anyway, I'm talking. I feel like I'm going on a tangent here,
Yeah,
Maria.
no, 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 no. I don't think, yeah, I don't think you're on a tangent at all. I think this is a really important thing to talk about, because it is so prevalent in the journey through disruption or a transition of any kind. You can't ignore the emotions. If you do, if you stuff them down, they will rear their ugly heads at the most inopportune time. And it's better to find the way to work with them and allow them to inform you, and then be able to release them when they no longer serve you. And then you can, and when you have developed the skill to do that, it will be a skill you'll have in your treasure chest for the rest of your life. And
Absolutely.
there will be other transitions, I promise.
And right, that is the common denominator, right? Like, you know, we just need to all recognize that, right? Even though we may be conditioned to think, you know, if we get in this place of crisis or upheaval, that it's somehow a one-off, it's an exception, this doesn't happen. We
Yeah,
need to completely rethink that, because these moments of upheaval are the common denominator, right? It isn't this
yeah,
just the unusual few that have them. By the way, everyone has them, even people who operate with this, you know, kind of external, you know, modicum of success. Everyone has them. And
yep,
so the readiness that we have, these skill building techniques, will be used, as you said, again and again and again. And I will say, once we become familiar with these techniques, our ability to withstand disruption or transitions, right, goes up by orders of magnitude, right?
absolutely,
We can take body
absolutely.
blows, right?
You know,
And
I call it exercising that resilience muscle, right? You bounce back so much more gracefully and more easily when you've had, and you have to go through it. There's no getting around it.
yes,
You've
right. No
got to go
bypassing.
through it, and the better you, the better you learn to get through it, the more useful those skills will be for you in the future. And that's when you build resilience and confidence in yourself, and the self-doubt takes a walk. And yeah.
You know, there was a woman in my research who I'd love to tell you a little bit of her story, right? Her name was Lakshmi, and she was doing this very fancy
So glad. I'm so glad you
MD,
could tell her story. I love her
yes,
story.
MD PhD program. She's a very smart lady at this very large, you know, Big Ten university in the Midwest. And at one point, she said, this isn't who I want to be anymore.
Mhm.
And it was striking because she said, and I'll never forget her words. She's like, I never even dreamed outside of this, right? Ever since she was in her early 30s, ever since she was a little girl, this was who she was going to be. And imagining that persona and acting in alignment with that persona was what had gotten responded to throughout her life. And so she found herself, having invested a lot of time and energy in this moment, um, and really scared to say, I don't know which way to turn. And I think the interesting thing that might be, helpful for your listeners, Maria, is that what brought her to the realization was, yes, she had a growing sense of she wasn't in the right place. She was very depleted, but she got an accelerating number of very debilitating headaches. And she was somebody who was very physically attuned to her body. And she kept coming to this place of saying, what is my body trying to tell me that I don't know yet? And I
Yeah.
just found her words so fascinating. And ultimately it was this kind of thorough transition of self that she needed to go through. And in order to begin, she decided that she would kind of do some volunteering with the AmeriCorps. So she pivoted into an education type role. By no means something that was going to be a lifetime kind of employment, but it gave her income and allowed her to catch her breath. And from there, she continued to ask questions. And ultimately, she shares, this surprise about finding herself through. From the AmeriCorps, she went into a number of different settings and learned about skills that she had overlooked, or ones that she had but had never fostered, so they really were undeveloped, and gave her a lot of runway once she gave them some oxygen. And ultimately, she tells this story at the end that her colleagues in this new field, because she ultimately got herself to this organizational design role in a technology company. And and she says, people thought I was a leader and that I was funny. And she said, neither of those two things were like ever on my wavelength. Like, it was shocking to her. And yet it was something that was so enlivening and powerful for her. And the way she got from being a student, an MD, PhD student, to being in organizational development was a series of small steps. And I think that's one thing I hope that your listeners hear from our discussion today, Maria, is that, oftentimes we're schooled to say, oh, it's one swing of the bat. It's like, oh, I'm here, I'm at transition, boom, I'm going to make the right choice and off I go.
Right.
And my research reveals that the real process is 1,000 times beyond that, right? It really is recognizing where we are, being able to articulate, raise our awareness to where we are and the breaks that we're having, and then being able to take the next smallest step again and again and again. And that's really what helped Lakshmi.
Yeah. And I'm so glad it did. I love what you just said, because it's so important. S- We are conditioned to be impatient. We want things to happen for us faster than they may
Right.
be able to happen. And we get impatient. And again, it makes us feel like there's something wrong with us. We're not doing it right. I want to, um, I want to put volume to your words here that taking small steps and being patient with yourself, giving yourself grace to make this transition that you may be in one that has meaning and purpose and lands you in a place that you want to be. So many of my clients come to me telling me that they've been doing what they've been doing in their career because somebody thought it would be a good idea for them to do it. And they spent, like you said, time, energy, in many cases, a lot of money, getting into a lot of debt because of higher education, and they're not happy.
I'm so happy that you're pulling on that thread, because it's an important one, and it reminds me kind of what's actually happening when we're going through a period of growth, because transitions, right, enable us to transform, which is really adult growth, right? We talk about
Right.
growth in the young, right? We talk about, developmental milestones, and we all of a sudden forget about all that in adulthood, when in fact it continues to happen. And
Yeah.
what's really happening at those times is we are taking an identity or self-concept that we create when we enter adulthood. And we do that when we enter adulthood by looking externally for the cues, right? So we create our definition and expectation for who we are by what's around us, right? Our occupation, the communities we live in, the education we've gotten, our families, our religious affiliations, right? There's a zillion, our racial, our ethnic connections, right? All those things are in kind of the external surround. And as we go through transitions, we're being invited to re-examine those assumptions. That's what we're being asked to do. And
Yeah.
for those of us who are willing to go through that re-examination, what we're doing is we are recognizing that our values and what holds meaning to us has shifted. And this is just the end of what is a terrible, terrible technology day. That sound. I'm so sorry. Um,
Okay.
I don't know what else could go wrong, but something will before the end of the call. So this notion of basically migrating to those things that hold value and meaning to us is really what's happening as we go through cycles of transition. And I want to be clear, it isn't like we throw the baby out with the bathwater. What
Right.
we do is we recenter. We say, I used to think that I needed to be a GM by the time I'm 40. Yeah, I'm not so sure. Maybe what I need to do is work in an environment where I can be valued and that I can advance an idea, and that's more important than a title.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's an evolution, right? We are ever evolving. We are ever evolving. We're getting a lot of clicking on your audio now, Linda. So
Like
something
I
else
said, did I just say we were going to
did
get more?
happen. Yeah. You called it. All right. Let's try that. Nope. Do you hear it?
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I'm going to shut off my video. Maybe it'll give it, or is it gone now?
Yeah, I want to finish this with you on video, so let's just do the best we can. So that didn't help. The video is off and I'm still hearing it. So I want, this is just so such an important topic. I want our listeners to hear about this really cool, extensively tested emotional reframing technique that you mentioned earlier, called HAIL. So tell us a little bit more about what it is and how that can be useful to us.
I will try.
Don't worry, just
And
keep going.
the tool is called HAIL, HAIL, and it is a mnemonic, meaning each of the letters of the word hail, right? And it's like hail a cab. Each of them stands for a set of questions that I encourage people to ask of themselves. And what those questions do is they help us take our experience of an emotion like regret or shame and place it outside of ourselves and look at it differently. I always think about it like this. It's as if I am standing with you on a sidewalk, Maria, and I say, okay, draw that skyscraper that's in front of us. And then I say, oh, come, come, come. And we ride up in the elevator of the building across the street and we stand on the roof. And I say, okay, Maria, now I want you to draw that same skyscraper. And so the technique HAIL allows us to take an emotion like shame and really reposition it in our understanding. And what that does is it takes shame and it diffuses the power it can have over us. And I tell a story in the book, at one point about how I reframe an emotion, right? And you might find this silly, but at one point after production of my first book, I was asked to speak to this very lovely group in New York City. And I was finished my talk. It was a great talk. We were in this like very fancy place on Fifth Avenue. And it was time for Q&A. And this woman raises her hand and she says, okay, Linda, now that you're an author, how do you think about your career? And with her question, I started to cry. Now, I had no understanding of why I was in tears. Now, of course, I'm also in front of more than 100 people. I'm like, oh my goodness, they're all going to see me crying. I kept going and I was, added some funny things. But what Hale helped me to do once I got to the coat room after it all was over was it helped me ask some very important questions. And I recognized that I was somebody who was raised in a house that I was never encouraged to use my voice. And shame was very present with me that night on the stage. And when I was asked that question, my initial thought was like, oh my goodness, I'm so ashamed I cried. But after I used Hale, I got to this place where I said, you know what? Those tears were a high five to saying goodbye to the power over me that shame had, because I was not only recognizing that I had a voice, I was using it and encouraging others to use theirs. So this very, very powerful technique can help us re-experience emotions, even those that have been wired into our existence from a young age, and help us really be free with them in a new way. And I can't say enough about that. I use this technique with lots of people. I train coaches and certify them on how to do this technique. And it is really quite impactful, because even women who, it can help women at any part of their transition. It can help someone who's just dealing with the initiating circumstances, which are overwhelming and quite destabilizing. And it can help somebody who's late in their transition and acting in a new place, that perhaps is new and exciting, whether it's a new marriage, a new career, a new geography, whatever it is. And so that the tool is enormously flexible in that it can catch with us wherever we are and help us go forward. It isn't just for the few that are in this place or that place. It's really for anyone who's dedicated to opening their hearts to this opportunity for growth that transitions allow.
I love the analogy you used of being on the street and looking at the skyscraper from below and then going up and looking at it from above. It's all about our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can shift the way we look at things, it reminds me of my very favorite quote by Wayne Dyer. When you change the way that you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yes.
That is perspective. And when we can do that, when we can look at them differently, reframe them, then we have just taken back our power. I love that.
And this is really what it's about. When I started my research, I used to think transition was about the event, right? And then so it was the layoff, the merger and acquisition, the divorce, the remarriage, the birth of another child, whatever it is, the menopause, whatever it is, the empty nest. And later I was like, okay, no, it includes feelings, right? A transition can be triggered by, a feeling, when we're in the checkout line at the supermarket. It can be triggered by all sorts of things. Now that I'm far deeper into my research, I realize that emotions, feelings, events can all be a part of the initiating circumstance, but the only common denominator of a transition is turning up the volume on our own voices. And that takes a lot of practical work, but it also takes reframing emotions, because without this ability to look at the skyscraper one way and then look at it another way, we will be unable to really get at the power of our own voice. And I'm not talking about our audible voice, right? I've been speaking now for half an hour. Everyone knows I'm from Boston. Everyone says no one's surprised. But what I mean when I say voice, it's really about our truth and our essence. And that sounds like a funny thing to say, because everyone's like, well, don't I know my truth? I know who I am. And I think what I've learned through my research is that bears some thinking, and maybe we can talk about this next time, Maria. But recognizing our voice, understanding our own voice, and then being willing to act in alignment with that voice, those themselves are big topics, and a part of this whole lovely journey of transition.
Yeah, I love that you you shared that, because the fact of the matter is this is a huge topic. There is a lot of information from your book, and that there's no way we can cover today. So I have already invited Linda to come back to visit with us and talk more about it. And I think this topic of voice is a great one to spend more time at, because it has also to do with the way we talk to ourselves, right? You'd also touched on transition, that you entered into your research thinking transition was the event that happened. Um, I know that we both know that that's not the case, and that the transition is that journey we take from where we were to where we land at the end of that particular transition. And then there will be others where we will start here and land here. And it's that journey, and it's how we evolve. The thing that happened, the event, that's just an event. Yeah, Linda, this has been, I knew it was going to be a powerful conversation. I'm so grateful that you joined us. I would love to wrap this up if you would, and hopefully that clicking sound will allow you to share us some key takeaways, so that, we call the show Tips for the Transition for a reason. Share us with, maybe your 3 top tips that you can leave us with, that will allow us to do something today.
I will try my best, Maria, with this suboptimal tech day I'm having. So thank you for still smiling as it happens.
Don't worry.
The 3 tips are pretty straightforward, right? The first is try to hold in your heart that transitions are common and normal in the adult experience. They are not exceptions. They are not reflections of a deficit or something wrong. They're actually signals that there's more for you ahead. And so first tip is just hold in your heart that these are normal occurrences that can offer you incredibly wonderful opportunities. So first tip. Second tip is,
I love that. So we are not alone in this.
The second tip is welcome into your navigating this, the notion that there are answers that are not binary. It's not this or that, yesterday or today, I was successful or not. Recognize that the answer will be part of a path of ongoing discovery. And the great news is that it brings us closer to who we are, right? Those things that hold value and meaning to us. And that's a very unique and individual voice that, by the way, the world desperately needs. The world desperately needs all of us to activate those voices. And the third tip I would say is that welcome some thinking on this, right? There's a lot of information in my book, on my podcast, on Maria's wonderful archive of her podcasts. There's wonderful information to help us keep asking ourselves new questions, because it is the new questions that allow us to accelerate through times of incredible upheaval. And I invite you to explore Dancing with Disruption. It's available in most libraries. It's also available anywhere you get books or audiobooks. But it is an invitation to start a new conversation with yourself through asking and walking right next to you as you go through reflection and the ability to ask new and different questions. And I think there's incredible power in that. So I invite you to do that again and again.
I love that. Those and the link to Linda's book will also be in the show notes below. So It is a thrill to have you here. This is the book we're talking about, and it is, as I said, the link to it is below in the show notes. So, Linda, let's just wrap by telling people, I know they are going to want to reach out to you to learn more. What is the very best way you shared with us to get in touch with you?
The very easiest way is LinkedIn. You just pop a note on LinkedIn. I answer them all the time, and it's a quick and easy way.
And she's very responsive on LinkedIn, I'll tell you. She absolutely is. Linda, thank you. I know this is not the last time we will talk, and I hope to we will be following each other. So I know that our audience is going to get more of you as time goes on. So thanks for joining us.
Maria, it's been an absolute honor. Thank you, and thank you again for all the work that you do.
Oh, my pleasure. Don't worry about it. All right. And thank you to everyone else for watching and listening. I appreciate that you're a part of our community. And if you enjoyed this episode, again, please subscribe, comment, click a star if there's a star. Let us know how you liked it and what you think. And as I said at the top of the show, I create and share resources for women. Plus, as a career and life coach, I work with women to help them navigate these challenging times that Linda and I have been talking about, to do them more easily and gracefully. So, if you'd like to continue this conversation, I invite you to join me in the Career Transition Roadmap private Facebook group, and we can have more conversation about this. So let's meet again here next Wednesday, as always, because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Till next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan with a click in my throat, helping you turn transition into triumph.